Folks, welcome back to Tabletop Tactics. For this special State of Play, we're reviewing today the all-new GT Arks of Omen mission pack with myself, the Spider, Mr. Chef, and Mr. Beard. So some significant changes in this one and some tweaks, I would say. It's probably a fair assessment. Yeah. Let's go over the biggest change first, which is the all-new Arks of Omen Detachment. So with the all-new Detachment in mind, let's dissect it in its entirety. This is going to be a massive change to 40k in general, the way it's played.
Biggest change, I'd say, in 9th edition.
For sure. Yeah, because actually this is a core army building setup. So the way that we build armies now has been cracked open.
Yeah. Wide open somewhere.
Wide open.
Like a coconut.
There's no minimum troops requirement anymore. There is a minimum requirement, but it's of your choosing.
Yeah. So basically the way that it works is you must take in an Arks of Omen GT mission an Arks of Omen detachment. That's it. No ifs, ands or buts about it. You can't take double patrol. Super heavies are gone, but they are all wrapped up in this one detachment. So regardless of your army, you must have one HQ, unless you are Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights, because you don't technically have any. And then you have to pick 3 compulsory choices from a choice of troops, elites, fast attack, heavy support, or Lords of War.
What about flyers?
Well, flyers you can still take.
But still only 2.
But 0 to 2. They're not compulsory. Because after the compulsory choices, you have a bunch of optional stuff, as you would expect, which is effectively free of everything else, but you can have up to 9 troops. So you could run 12 troops if you really wanted to.
It's an old brigade style troops.
You could run 6 elites if you wanted to, but if you want to do that, you have to use your compulsory of that particular type. There's a few other little things in here as well. You can finally add in fortifications and Lords of War into the same detachment. So monoliths can run in a detachment and become Novok.
That's a nice little quality of life changer.
It is,
You can finally have your Spartan be an Iron Warrior.
Will this mean that we see monoliths?
No, they're still terrible. But you know, it's cool, right? You can also dedicated transports are the same, so 1 for every infantry unit in the army, and you can also have 3 additional elite slots, but only for characters. So for all those armies like Death Guard, Apothecaries, they can take up an elite slot without then stopping you from taking up to 3 more normal elite slots, or another 3 more if they're your compulsory. So this really opens up stuff for a lot of really fluffy army builds as well. You're running White Scars, you can run just fast attack, loads of bikes. There are some issues with it. I really don't like the fact that pretty much every army is now going to go, well, I don't need troops, so I'm not going to bother.
The troops thing, I've not quite wrapped my head around it properly yet, but I don't know if I like it or not, because there's not... On one hand, it's nice because a lot of the time when I'm doing a list for a battle report, let's say I'm running Sisters of Battle, I'll get to troops, and say, oh, I've got 3 Sisters of Battle, I've got nothing to say about them, let's move on, who cares? In that way, it's good, but in some ways, I think, if you think about like the competitive crowd, for instance, it's going to make list building, it's just going to be all the best stuff.
Which is, you know, let's be frank, that this is what this is aimed at. Now, we will house rule it here. We are going to use this for our Tempest games because we like these changes. It enables us to do some cool things. And oftentimes we're still going to probably want to run a few troops here and there. Especially certain armies are going to be like...
Certain armies still require them.
But like, so Elder players, for example, they usually scratch their heads over like, well, I could take a couple of Rangers or maybe some Guardians. But realistically, I want bikes, I want Swooping Hawks, I want Dire Avengers, I want Wave Serpents. Now you don't need to run them. Now you can argue that, oh, but you're going to lose out on OBSEC, because OBSEC is still a thing and all that. But
and they have, it's probably a fair time to mention that I can see in a lot of the missions, which we won't go over all of the missions today, but this is a significant change to go with it. I can see that they've tried to encourage objective secured units being taken troops, because a lot of the progressive elements of the missions are if it's an objective secured unit holding the objective, you'll get an extra command point, or if an objective secured unit killed a certain thing, you'll get an extra command point.
But it's specifically troops. It is specifically troops. Or War Dogs or Armigers. So we'll get to that in a minute, but they've tried...
Trying to encourage
They've tried to do an encouragement, but my counterpoint is, okay, well, that's fine. some armies you go, you know what, Thousand Sons, I want rubrics. They're very good.
Yeah.
Other armies like Death Guard, who haven't been running Plague Marines for ages, will continue to just not run Plague Marines.
Yeah.
And if anything, will now just go, I guess I don't need to take Poxwalkers, so I'll just run a bunch more Terminators.
Yeah.
I think as well, like for some people's armies, so like if we take my Iron Warriors for instance, most of it is heavy support.
Yeah.
There's so much heavy support in my army. So all of a sudden for me, being selfish, I can use all my cool toys, which is really fun.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I'll run 3 Sakaras and a unit of Obliterators and some Rapier batteries. It's cool.
Yeah, it is awesome. I guess your minimum requirement will be 3 heavy support then.
Yes! And then you can take another 3. So you're effectively running a spearhead with extra options, and all of these detachments cost 0 CP, give you 0 CP, so everyone will start with 6 CP now. That is also very important to note, because a lot of armies will just go, well, you know what, I don't need the CP, so I'll just run a double patrol. And I'll spend the 2 CP to get more of the stuff that I wanted. You now can basically do that, but with a bit more flexibility and more CP.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that's worth pointing out here as well, because I'm sure there's some people immediately going, but how am I going to run double patrol to take 2 of the same character because I'm limited by which character I can take? There is a new stratagem for you.
Yeah.
So
And it's only 1 CP as well.
it's only 1 CP. You can only use it once.
Yeah.
It's called Heroic Support, and it effectively says that if there is an army rule that limits you to 1 of a particular type of model in a detachment, excluding gene sect for gene sealer cults because you're not allowed nice things, you can take 2 instead. So demon princes, you can take 2.
Yeah. So
War
the
bosses.
Tau Crisis Commanders.
Everyone can be Farsight now for 1 CP.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be like, I'm going to run 2 patrol. Now, Farsight armies might go, but I was running 2 patrol to take 4 Crisis Commanders. You are in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, you've been
but you know what?
there a little bit.
That's fine because it was silly anyway. But like, so Orcs, for example, they always struggle to get like, because their good characters all have like War Boss or Speed Boss. You can only take 1. So now you can go, yeah, I can actually have a War Boss and a Death Killer War Trike in the same detachment. Huzzah.
Nice. Yeah.
So it is nice. And I'm with you, Bid. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about it because there's options for a lot of narrative here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, look, you can build amazing armies with it. I mean, from a Flesh Terror point of view, to not have to run Assault Intercessors when I could run, say, Assault Marines, that's really cool. And that is a very Blood Angel, Flesh Terror style thing to do. Not that Assault Intercessors or even regular Intercessors aren't fluffy, but you often read in the fluff that they're going to come in and drop pods or, you know, jump packs, that sort of jazz. So it kind of makes sense. But with no troops requirement at all, the other end of that spectrum is I fear that, you know, there are a lot of armies where the troops really are just attacks.
Yeah,
so you just won't see them.
Yeah. Sisters, I can imagine. Chaos, I would argue as well. Pretty much all Chaos armies apart from Thousand Sons.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame given, you know, the Chaos Space Marines should be an iconic thing to have.
Space Marines.
I think that says more about the unit itself.
But it does, you're right.
Change.
Yeah, you're absolutely
Chaos
right.
Space Marines have never really been enough to really want to take them. So I think this really emphasizes that unit just has issues.
Yeah.
Like OBSEC is a cool ability, but it's sort of one of those things you go, oh, OBSEC, that's really nifty. But my opponent just has better stuff to kill my OBSEC. Like troops aren't exactly survivable anyway, unless you're like talking Custodes or something like that.
And there are so many Warlord traits and stratagems and things which can potentially give OBSEC, sometimes in an aura. So then the fact not having OBSEC innate doesn't necessarily matter too much in a lot of competitive builds because you'll often work something in where you're going to give OBSEC to your elite unit or whatever. So it becomes less of a requirement.
Yeah. And there are going to be some armies which suffer a little bit from this lack of multiple detachments. Dark Angels, unless it gets FAQ day 1, you can't run First Company anymore because it specifically states a Vanguard detachment. Well, this isn't a Vanguard detachment. I would house rule that or TO that as, well, it's clearly a Deathwing detachment. You can have your OBSEC terminated.
I'm sure they will FAQ.
They will, I'm sure.
They did fix the common one which needed to be FAQ, which is if I spend a strat on a Warlord trait, but I'm, say, a Baden, I have multiple Warlord traits.
All 3.
It says you get all of your Warlord traits for the 1 CP.
Now, it's interesting that you mention a Baden, because that leads us into our next point quite nicely, which is about allied detachments, because unfortunately they do still exist. It hurts me in my soul. Not a fan. But they do still exist. They are much, much more limited.
Much more limited.
You have to follow the Battle Brothers section. It's the page after, and it will tell you exactly what you can do and how you can take it. So, for example, a common one was, I'm going to take a baton in a Supreme Commander.
Yeah.
That's no longer a possibility. No one can take a Supreme Commander.
Yeah.
You don't need to, because you've got a Lord of War choice in your detachment.
True.
Right? But you can't have a baton being a Supreme Command detachment attached with a Knight army with some flamers, for example. What you can do is things like, if you are a Chaos army, you can take a Dreadblade in a super heavy auxiliary.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can take one ally.
Yeah.
If you are Emperor's Children, you can take a Demon detachment, but only if they're Slaanesh.
Which I like.
You know who you are. Naughty, naughty. There's other things as well, like, so Gene Stealers can take a detachment of Brood Brothers, but it has to be a patrol or a super heavy auxiliary. So you can still take little things like that.
Yeah, Astra Militarum can take a Militarum Tempestus.
Exactly. Patrol, you can have things like, what was the other one?
There's one that we do not like very much.
I'm about to get to that one, yeah. So Imperium can take Agents of the Imperium as a support, auxiliary support or a patrol. So you can take your Inquisitor Heidegger can enter the battlefield alongside a unit of Votan.
Yeah, that's a terrible.
Imperium can take a patrol of Votan, and I hate it.
So there's two reasons why this is not a good thing.
Yeah.
But Votan are basically, in that situation, Votan are going to fill a slot that certain Imperium armies don't have. So they're going to add very, very shooty potential to a combat heavy army and really boost them up that way. The other thing that's really annoying is that as far as I'm aware, they're Xenos.
Yeah,
they've always been Xenos.
They trade with the Imperium, but Tau can't ally with them.
No.
Yeah.
They sort of trade with everyone.
They wouldn't probably ally with Orcs and Necrons and stuff. But it's something like that where you go, well, if you're going to do it and they did it for Tau as well, I'd be like, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand the fluff reason behind it, and I understand that they are closer to the Imperium than everyone else.
Yeah.
But it's just from a mechanics perspective was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
They're already quite a controversial army based on how powerful they are.
Yeah.
So being able to add that into the majority of armies, let's be frank, because it's Imperium, I just don't feel like it's needed.
I feel my thoughts on it are that I don't mind it from a fluff perspective, because when you read the Votan fluff, you go, okay, well, they do trade with everyone. Basically, money talks with the Votan. They are very opportunistic, and they can be opportunistic in a murderous way as well, but they can be opportunistic in, like, we'll work with you in order to get these funds or get these resources or whatever. That kind of makes sense, but I think from a mechanics point of view, to allow them to ally with the Imperium, I think is a mistake personally. I think, it does open up some quite powerful combinations. And it's a weird thing where, okay, well, you're taking away Tzeentch Flamers from other marked Chaos Legions, but then you're allowing Votan to go with Imperium armies. So you're basically, swapping one thing out for another.
It doesn't help to balance the competitive
No,
game,
I don't think so. I think it's an unnecessary, it's just unnecessary.
Yeah.
There's just no need for them to be an ally, in my
They will prevent, like, super doctrine type stuff. So you won't be able to go, oh, here's my Leagues of Votan fire support for my all Sanguinary Guards Blood Angels. You will then be losing out on things like Savage Echoes and stuff like that. And the Votan will obviously not get their super Ancestral Judgment, but they're still a separate detachment, which means they'll still get, like, you won't get, like, this, you would get, I think you would get the, the Ancestral, I'm thinking of, like, the Greater Furian League where they do the 2 judgment tokens instead of 1.
Yeah.
That is, if your army is Leagues of Votan.
Yes.
So you won't get that aspect of it, but you'd still get I still get a free reroll and count as 2 models for objectives. And it's quite easy. It has to be a patrol, but it's quite easy to just go, well, that's 10 Hearthguard to hold the back line, or Hearthkin, sorry, and then I've got, it's a patrol, so I can take 2 fast out. I'll just take 12 bikes.
Yeah, the bikes are amazing.
Yeah.
Or I'll take a Hecaton with a Brock here and some Berserks inside. Sure, that's about 600 to 700 points of your army. But as we all know, that's a very effective 600 to 700 point
investment.
I think, to be honest, that's what you've hit what I was going to say, I think if people do ally them in, it will probably be for the bikes, because the bikes come with OBSEC.
Yeah.
They're fast.
Who needs troops when you've got allied Votan, right?
Incredible
Exactly,
firepower, you know, even without any support or, you know, judgment tokens or anything. They just are a really good unit, and they're very aggressively pointed. Now, we are doing this review without the Munitorum field manual, like potential points increases or decreases. So
Data slates.
yeah, so
like,
whether we'll see like the Votan suddenly become aggressively allied in, as opposed to I'll just run a Votan army anyway.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that. But I think I sort of think, well, is it you know, should the option exist, you know, in the first place? I'd say probably not, but you know.
I'd say that for all allies, to be honest.
Yeah,
if you want to win on the merits of your army with its strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah,
but
only
anyway.
from a GT point of view. Like, you can do some really cool, fluffy narrative stuff. I mean, you know, I go all the way back to old school fantasy. I loved playing Dogs of War, where you had a unit of dwarves and we had pikemen and, you know, like all of these different, you know, melting pot, and it was a fluffy army. But for a 40k GT, I'd probably say, yeah, stick to the one, but that's just an opinion.
So the detachment is, like, they are super interesting because they do offer a lot of options, and as you say, this is probably the biggest change in terms of army building since
it will kind of reset competitive 40k, really.
Yeah, it's definitely going to cause a massive shake-up.
And look, I'm excited about it.
It's cool. It's a change.
We're going to be using it in our Tempest games, and we will be using it in our next league as well. So this is what we're going to be using it. Full throttle as in GT missions for the league, and then for Tempest we'll just use the Arks of Omen detachment rules. But it is exciting because we can do a lot of fun stuff.
I'm so excited about my Iron Warriors.
Yeah, I get it. Like,
the Havocs are like, we'll get used. Yay!
We're the troops now. Look at us.
Yeah, it is epic. And I think even like the Flesh Terrors, whilst I don't have any Assault Marines, it does mean that I could run Vanguard Veterans and Sanguinary Guard without having to run the Assault Marines and so forth. Maybe that's too much. Obviously, I'll run that in a stronger game, but you know, you can do some really fun stuff with it, I think, for sure. Well, folks, that actually really concludes our thoughts on the detachments. It's both exciting and will be interesting to see how it works out from a competitive point of view, which, as you've said, is pretty much what this book is for. But you can, of course, use it to play casual match play games at home also. With that in mind, there's a couple of extra things to go over. The first thing I want to talk about is secondaries. We're not actually going to cover all of the secondaries here because there's over 90 of them, and it would be a very, very long-winded video in order to cover all of them. But, Chef, you have put them all down in an article.
I've done the type. So, yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I think there's 96 secondaries, including the generic ones. Most of them have remained the same.
Yeah.
You can finally use Leagues of Votan in GT missions, because, you know, if anyone said that you weren't allowed to previously, probably weren't worth playing with.
Extreme,
and there's been a few like quality of life changes. So like the Chaos Marine ones, which at print were you have to have the objective and there can be no enemy units in range of it. It's now you just need to control it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier.
Yeah, there's a few easy ones. There's a few little tweaks. So like some of the Necron ones have gotten more difficult. Some of the Admech ones have gotten, well, I say some of them. All of the Admech ones have gotten easier and score you more points. Some of the Sisters ones have changed ever so slightly. Some of them have been removed completely from the game.
Yeah, they simplified the Marine ones, so all of the Astarte sub-factions.
You get one now.
You get one now instead of three to speak.
Yeah, and some of the generic ones have become a little bit easier, or as you mentioned earlier, you gain a CP. So if you don't have a way of generating command points, but you do have troops or war dogs or armigers, and one of these secondaries is chosen, you've got a way of doing it. So grind them down, for example. If one of the units that you still need to score the victory points, you still need to have killed more units than your opponent. Yeah. But if you've done that and one of your units is a troops, war dog, or armiger that's done that, you gain a CP.
Yeah, and this is where they're trying to encourage you taking the troops. Yeah.
Although weirdly,
these little perks, but I mean, you know.
Yeah. I mean, weirdly, that's actually a massive benefit for Knights players who are just running all dogs anyway.
It is, yeah.
So they just go, nice one.
Yeah.
But
otherwise,
that's like
pretty much an auto take.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a few that have changed and a few that have been removed or tweaked, or I think pretty much everything that's a warp charge has gone up by one. Yeah. But it's all in the article. The link is down below. Go and check it out. It breaks it down, and it's really quite nice and simple because it's just based on the Nephilim one. So you can read that with your Nephilim in hand. Nice cup of cocoa as well. Got to have a cup of cocoa in these winter months.
Yeah. I'm also there. Consider signing up for On Demand as well.
Yeah.
On the old website, there's a whole treasure trove of stuff on there. A crate of delights, you might say. Hundreds more videos.
And then there's just 2 little changes in the playing the game section itself.
Yeah. So first of which is no CP for reserves anymore.
Yep, strategic reserves, just you still follow the normal rules, but you don't pay CP for it anymore. So everyone will start with 6 CP, generally. And then you can spend those on the pre-game stuff and, you know, Warlord traits and relics, or taking more than one of a limited character or, you know, pre-game stuff. So you've got a bit more flexibility in that regard as well.
And it's a nice little extra potential help for, you know, if you really are worried you're going to be alpha struck, you know, a couple of your units which perhaps you may have not had the CP to reserve before, you've now got the option to go, you know what, against this army and looking at this board and terrain, I'm actually going to reserve these things. So it's got some tactical nuance in there as well.
It still follows exactly the same principle, as does the rest of the playing the game. The last little change is there's a section in there about conceding. And this was ironically one of our favourite things about Nephilim. If you remember when we did the review way back when, which was, the line was, if you concede, your opponent scores a minimum of 60 points. So you can't like really eke out a battle and then go, I concede, and you only get 20 points. You go, no, you get 60. It's now just, if you concede, your opponent wins. So that is really putting the onus back on the TOs to go, okay, well then I get to decide what happens if you concede. So generally, I imagine most people will go, well, if you concede, your opponent gets 100. Because that then disincentivizes you from conceding, and it also stops people from trying to game the system of going, well, I scored really low, but you've also scored low, but I concede, and therefore you don't get maximum points, or I'll bring you down with me. Yeah, exactly. So it removes a lot of the feels bad from that aspect of it, and puts the control back in the hands of the TOs, which I'm sure that they are more than happy to do when it comes to running their events. That's kind of it. Like, there's no other changes.
No, that's it. You know, I think as I said at the beginning when we introed the video, it's tweaks, and really the major change is the detachments, the Arks of Omen detachment, which is obviously a huge change. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of these new changes? Are you a fan of the new detachment rules? Are you a fan of the new secondary tweaks and the missions? Let us know your thoughts. For now, I've been the Spider, he's been the Chef, and he's been the Beard. We'll see you in another review very soon. Bye-bye.